So yesterday we went and picked up this 05 STI, got it back to the shop, went for a nice little drive around the block. This thing smoked out the entire freaking neighborhood. It was knocking like a son of a gun. So I brought it in the shop, pulled the motor out, tore the motor down, found a completely burned out and melted piston on cylinder number 2, which also happened to be a new short block. So somebody did something a little bit sus, because that of course shouldn't have happened. Now today we are going to be assembling and installing a brand new motor for the 05 STI. So let's run through what we have. Sitting here is a from the dealer brand new OEM Type RA short block. Now the Type RAs came in a 2019 or newer Subaru STI. They do have a little bit better internals than a traditional Subaru STI block. Now this thing is assembled with pistons, rods, crank. It's a complete ready to go short block. So we just need to get the heads on, get it timed, get all the oiling components on, and we can get it in the car. So there's a short block. Now here we have our refreshed cylinder heads. Of course, all new stem seals, resurfaced gasket area, reground valves. Everything is freaking fresh and ready to go with these heads. Even though it's a brand new block, of course you still want to clean the gasket surface with some brake clean. The one and only mod this motor's getting is a set of ARP head studs. Now there is no torque spec for the stud into the block. You don't want it loose, you just want it hand tight. OEM gasket as always. Make sure it's orientated properly. Easiest thing to mess up is this hole right here. So make sure that oval goes around the hole in the block. Bit of ARP lube on the washers. So the torque spec on these ARPs is 30, then 60, then 90. 30 to seat the head. Final of 90. Camshafts are installed with the assembly lube where it needs to be. 3 bond is on the cam cap. Let's get this girl installed. Torque spec on these outer 8 is 14 foot-pounds, which is 168 inch-pounds. And the torque spec on these inners, cam gear side, is 7 foot-pounds, which is literally nothing. All right, last thing to install is the valve cover. So you gotta get these half moon jimmies installed. And sealant has to go on this front cam cap. Some people just seal the whole freaking thing because it's a Subaru and they like to leak, which isn't a bad idea, honestly. Last part to have a complete long block is that. I guess you wouldn't consider that a complete long block, but both cylinder heads are installed. Let's move on to all the oiling components. Pickup, baffle, pan, and oil pump. Well, I guess I did lie because we are doing an upgraded pickup. Let's hope that bolt can come out. Oh man. Y'all just see what I did? Success. You know, she is a little bit more rusty and crusty than I remember it. Oh well. Alrighty, oil pump time. Don't forget this seal that goes there, and the rest of it is RTV, which I like to apply on the oil pump. So we now have a complete ready to drop in engine. Now, me personally, I like to get the intake manifold and the wiring and all that jazz on before it goes back in the car. So this complete unit here. Now the thing with this, as you can see, someone did a pretty junky rattle can paint job on it. So I'm going to go ahead, pull the intake manifold off of the TGVs and the wiring and all that stuff, get this thing stripped and repowder coated. Goal is to get this motor back in the car and hopefully running by the end of the night. I'm not sure if that's a feasible goal or not, but it's worth a shot. So let's get to work. The closest powder I found to OEM is Desert Crimson Red from Prismatic. I know it looks a little funny right now, but let's get this thing coated in the oven and I'll show you how freaking perfect it looks. Alrighty, our manifold is out of the oven. This thing looks freaking perfect. Very, very excited there. I'll link that powder coat down below. So we're gonna install the manifold, the turbocharger, pretty much everything on this table besides those goodies over there. All that's gonna go back on the motor, and then we can get the motor in the car. Well friends, first start is out of the question for today. I may hold off on uploading till tomorrow, but I was trying to salvage this engine harness as best as possible. There's probably, if there's 20 connectors on the engine harness for all the coils, the injectors, all that good stuff, I would say about 30% of them are broken, including the throttle body, stuff for the TGVs, stuff for injectors. It ain't good. Subaru does not have one in stock. I think I should be able to find a used one by tomorrow, but we can still go ahead and we're gonna get the motor in the car and we'll just put the intake manifold on later. We have the engine dropped down into the car. Now, as we're waiting on that new engine wiring harness, we can get everything else installed. That includes the radiator with radiator hoses, the exhaust, all the bell housing bolts, the starter, the heater core hoses, pretty much everything but the alternator, power steering pump, an AC compressor, and the intake manifold itself. So this thing is ready for the intake manifold. I just picked up our replacement engine harness. So this guy is completely assembled and ready to be bolted on the motor. This is pretty much the last thing we need to fire this old girl up. Very, very curious how this is gonna go. All right, guys, just like that, we have a complete engine bay. Now there's a couple, I guess one thing that's missing. I did have to lop the MAF sensor plug off when I was building the Hawkeye a few months ago, and clearly forgot to replace it. So for now, we're gonna be firing it with no MAF. Not a big deal for a first start, but all this thing needs to get fired up is some engine oil. For the very, very first start, I'm not gonna put any sort of coolant in it, just in case we have a major problem and the motor's gotta come back out. I don't think that's gonna be the case because it's such a stock, simple build, but you never freaking know. So let's go ahead and dump in our 1030 VR1. It is a stock motor, stock bearing clearances. If it was a built motor, I'd be running 2050, but a stock, completely stock bottom end, 100% stock motor, 1030 is the way to go. So obviously we had a toast motor. I wanted this car to be a very simple, just stock car, so I didn't do any upgrades. So that means that factory turbo that was on here before is still on here. Now I have no idea if it was good or toast. Thankfully it's not a big deal to replace, but I'm hoping she's good. So if it smokes a bunch when it fires up, the turbo's probably yeeted. All right, I did a few checks. Let's go ahead and fire old girl up. Once again, there's no coolant right now, so I can't run it for very long, but I just want to make sure the gist of the build is assembled properly, you could say. To start, I always do like to pull off the crank sensor, just in case anything sounds funny while just cranking it alone, it doesn't fire up. So let's give her some cranks. I would say that sounds very healthy. Let's go and fire it up. This is weird. So fast. All right, guys, she is alive and running. No sort of leaks. And of course, importantly, but not more importantly than no leaks, is, look at that. Stop puffing out 40 gallons of smoke now. I don't know what I was gonna say 40 hours for, but good to go. Alrighty, I'm gonna kill the motor, check oil level. We need to add coolant and add power steering fluid. Well, of course, as expected, this thing is going way too smooth. So what happens when you're doing a completely stock, just the OEM rebuild. You got a bunch of variables to worry about. You just take parts off, put parts back on, you're done. Let's go throw some water in her. We got water in the cooling system, power steering fluid in the reservoir. Let's fire old girl up. So the coolant, the funnel here is gonna bubble until that's done being bled out. You don't have to do anything there, that'll bleed itself automatically. I like to have the heater cranked, it does help. And then power steering, let's go ahead and bleed that out. I swear Subarus take like 4 times as long as a Mitsubishi, or I guess any other car, to bleed out the power steering. I don't know what it is, man. Evos bleed out in like 5 seconds. Well, boys, I don't know if you can see this, but as she warmed up, she started smoking. So what are 2 things? Either the smoke is from the residual oil left in the intercooler piping. Granted, there's not much, the silicone couplers. There's probably oil left in the downpipe, well, I know there is, and in the exhaust. And as it warmed up, then that turned the oil into smoke. That's option number 1. Now, theory number 2 is that our turbo is indeed smoked. She needs to be replaced. So we just need to put some miles on it. I would say within like 5 miles, if it doesn't clear up, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a new turbo on it. It's a couple $100, I really didn't want to, but if that's what it needs to not smoke out the shop, that's what it needs. With that being said, let's go on a drive. Well, it already seems like the smoke kind of cleared up at least quite a bit. Maybe it's still smoking a little bit, but it's definitely way better than it was the first time I started it. Let's go on a quick drive to the gas station. A couple different things why we can't go far. As you can see, we are completely out of fuel, but that's okay. The clutch definitely needs to be bled. It's working enough to drive it a couple feet. Is my mic working? There we go. Working enough to drive it a few feet, but we don't have any brakes. E-brake works fantastic, but the brakes themselves, yeah, we need to bleed that clutch. The brakes themselves, pretty bummy. This thing is such a freaking clunker still. At least the motor, like everything under the hood should be good. But like, well, I guess besides the clutch needing to be bled. But like the rest of this car, man, the freaking Pontiac wheels, the 5-on-112 wheels crammed onto a 5-on-114 lug pattern with 2-inch spacers and brakes that don't work and freaking bumper falling off and all that jazz. Wouldn't be surprised if a wheel fell off. Well guys, I made it to the gas station. This thing ain't running too hot, man. I really need to get this MAF situated. It was smoking from underneath the hood, unsure where, and of course it was smoking out the exhaust as well. So I don't know, we only got a mile on it so far. Maybe the turbo's fine and it's just still burning residual oil, but I'm not too convinced at this moment. I have a feeling this turbo's probably gone. This thing looks ridiculous. Look how freaking ugly it is. Well, I got a couple bucks in fuel. That'll be enough to actually get some miles on this thing. Well, I'm gonna go back to the shop. I'm not gonna drive it till we get a few certain things dialed in. Number one, the freaking wheel is loose, which is a little hairy, obviously. You guys could probably hear it. Thankfully, I'm 10 feet from the shop. Second of all, we need that MAF fixed. Third of all, this battery's completely shot. If we get those three things fixed, mainly the MAF so that it actually runs properly, then I'd be more willing to stack some miles on it. You know what I'm saying? But let's limp her back to the shop and call her a day. We got so much done today, or done in this video. Freaking complete motor build, back in the car, and driving. That's a good day. Smoke is clearing up. That's good. I'm gonna go finger tighten these lug nuts, man. I have a feeling a wheel's about to fall off. Now, regarding why the motor blew up last time around, as you guys know, they put a freaking brand new motor in it and it didn't last very long. Injectors are fine. Obviously, everything is running fine with the car. My only assumption at this point is that engine harness. That thing had so many broken plugs on it. Broken plugs for coil packs, for injectors, for freaking TGVs. The crank sensor connector was destroyed. Throttle body, like all the important stuff on that harness were shot. So I'm assuming that is probably why it blew up. It would make sense. Even if an injector comes unplugged and you keep driving the car, you're gonna have a not happy motor. You like how people get mad, like frustrated. I mean, I guess I probably would too if I was driving behind this piece of crap. I'm just out here having a good old time in my freaking clunker. People drive by all frustrated that I'm going 2 miles an hour. Like that guy. Yeah, I think we hardly made it back. Now, obviously, if it was any other one of these cars, I would be greatly disappointed in myself. I knew those were freaking loose. If the wheel falls off, I don't care. On this car. Still a little bit sketchy to be driving on the road whatsoever, but from here to the gas station, it's all back roads, so don't roast me too bad. I'm just having fun. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Run's good. Couple little things to finish up in the engine bay department, but we are pretty much on to exterior. This thing's gonna get a whole new color change, new wheels and tires. It's gonna get the works. She's gonna look good when she's all finished up.